Hi everyone, welcome.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for coming to our session, the last one of the Academy stage, with the headline act, so you're in for a treat. So my name's Dan Buckland, I'm the director of an agency called Brandcast Health.
Hi guys, I'm Amish Patel, I'm an independent consultant, APC, Amish Patel Consulting.
Cool, so this isn't about us, so we're going to get straight into it. We really want to give you guys something to take back, something really practical. So why we've put together a session on customer journeys is that we know that there's a lot of sessions at the moment around AI, data, next best actions, medical versus marketing, all this stuff, which is a lot to take in, it's a lot of process to implement, and we know there's challenges that are happening right now. Most people are feeling pretty overwhelmed, and when it comes to designing content, looking at data and stuff, you're thinking, actually, it's hard enough to get our teams or ourselves to actually just meet the next deadline, so we're overwhelmed with content. It feels like a bit of a treadmill. Trying to get through approvals and stuff is a bit of a nightmare. So what we want to do is focus on being really relevant. Less is more, so stop trying to do everything and focus on things that work, and effectively creating an impactful journey. So what we want to do is just give you that time to step back, show you a tool that can help you with that process, and hopefully we can follow on the conversation afterwards.
Perfect, thanks Dan. So what we get out of this session, so in the next 20 minutes or so, you're going to be getting real-world insights into some of the activities and tactics that your pharma peers are doing, which we've gathered through a bit of a survey over the last few weeks, so really fresh data. We're going to be showing you a simple customer engagement journey model that you can use and take and apply to your campaigns, and I'm going to be showing you that approach today. We're going to be building an impactful HCP engagement journey together today around a scenario, which we'll polish up and send to you afterwards as well. And we're going to give you an opportunity to really continue that conversation beyond today, as well as receive some content from us, and really share challenges, overcome, create solutions together beyond today over the coming weeks and months as well.
Cool. So before we get started with the actual journey, just want a little bit of theory. Don't worry, it's not going to be too heavy. But yeah, I just wanted to introduce a concept here. So this is something that some of you may be familiar with or maybe not. So this is called basically a marketing flywheel. It's effectively a commercial model which is based on inbound marketing, which is incredibly customer-centric, so focusing on customer growth. There's loads of great applications for this, and I'm a big fan of inbound marketing, but the reason I wanted to use it today was to just highlight what are we trying to achieve, say, in marketing. I think this is going to also apply to medical, so if you're sitting here thinking, I'm not interested in marketing stuff, it also applies to medical, and I'll tell you how. But effectively, sometimes we get so bogged down in communicating brand messages and trying to push out our campaigns that we forget that we just have to have a regular, always-on workflow that helps us achieve our goals. And the flywheel helps us to uncomplicate this a little bit. So let me just explain. What we're trying to do at all times is we have to have some tactics and strategy and activity that consistently bring strangers or target customers into our sphere of influence. So that might be collecting consent or re-engaging, unengaged customers. There has to be something always happening that allows us to do this, and it has to be consistent and running at all times. The goal of that is simply to get an engagement, a subscription, or collect some data about someone so that you can have an ongoing journey about your product. The second stage is the stage that Pharma is most used to working with, which is the engage stage. That's essentially the sales narrative. So once you have a prospect, someone who's signed up to your database, your goal is to turn that prospect into a customer. You need a clear strategy and set of tactics and activities that allow you to engage with those prospects and turn them into customers. The third stage, so we've got a little pop-up there, mate. Hello. Got a little pop-up, if you want to just get rid of that. So the third stage is the delight stage. So this is often neglected, right? So once you get customers, it's actually much easier to extract value out of customers by getting them to use a product more often in more difficult situations, expanding their use. So you need to have clear tactics and strategies that allow you to onboard and grow your customers' confidence in your product. So the reason I wanted to do this is we're going to use for our customer journey, we're just going to create something simple for attracting that works, something simple for selling that works, and something simple for extracting value that works. So keep it simple, something that for you to build on afterwards.
Sorry, that slide thing isn't working. There we go, cool. So, for the next 20 minutes, forget about your day job. You are now a customer engagement lead working on an HIV brand targeting infectious disease specialists in secondary care. Your main business priority is gaining a switch from the competitor, using differentiation of your brand mainly on dosing schedule. Remember that side effects management and lifestyle is all important factors when it comes to maintaining patient adherence and ultimately efficacy. And as part of the whole process, patient education and monitoring are all vital towards maintaining that viral suppression. So pitch yourselves in that zone, and together we're going to create the customer journey together, as Dan mentioned. We're going to be sharing some of the insights at each stage of that flywheel to really help shape what we build together. So the idea there is to use data very quickly to create the activities that we're going to do. We're going to be giving you a specific content theme related to the objective of each stage of the flywheel, and then together we'll be asking for your contribution at each stage to discuss, okay, what are the most logical activities based on the data and based on the scenario. So yeah, let's go.
Cool. So one thing, if you're taking photos, you don't need to worry too much about that. If you scan the QR code, fill in the form, we'll send you all the slides immediately. You'll get them into your inbox. You don't need to worry about taking photos if you're stressed about that. Okay, so we did a survey with some people who are going to attend just for a couple of weeks, just to see what people would tell us. So effectively, we listed out a bunch of activities and asked the audience what they're actually doing at the moment to try and achieve the goals that we set out. So remember at the beginning, the first stage is to attract. All we want to do is to attract people, generate leads, get email subscriptions and some data about our customers that we can use going forward. We don't need to think about our products at this stage. All we need to think about is getting those subscriptions. So how are people trying to do that? There's some data here about what people are doing, so you can see what's highlighted there, and you can download these afterwards. But what's really important is what's impactful. So we asked to rank these activities and what's actually working. So what I really wanted to do was to focus on looking at what has been working here. So you can see at the top three here are all kind of event-based stuff. One's webinars, one's physical events, one's congress exhibition stands. So you can see that the activity that's getting healthcare professionals to bother to come and engage and subscribe with our content is quite educational, quite a lot of two-way conversation. And if you look at like anything beyond that, in terms of content that's working, that's not an event, it's case studies and probably KOL videos and podcasts, so if you take the top 5. So what I'd like to do is for you to imagine that this is the data that you've got. So you've been doing all these activities, and the data you've got is telling you this is what's working, right? So try and focus on that and have a think about it.
Assume that the data that we've got is also data on who these people are.
Yeah, I would.
This is all push stuff, right? So,
Well,
I mean, it's all pull. Are you doing any push stuff? Like, are you selecting data? Are you doing I don't know, disease state awareness? Are you doing other captures of insight that you can push stuff out to them, or are we just assuming that this is the deal?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
You've got 200 people in your database.
Yeah, say.
That's what we got, right? And
Right.
This is what we're doing with it.
No, so I think at this stage, what we're trying to do is like maybe there's people that aren't on our database. Maybe there's people that are on our database that aren't engaging with us, right?
So do you want to go after claims level data as an example and use that as an acquisition?
Not necessarily. So let's just bear with me for 1 second, right? So what we know about this audience based on our market research is that the healthcare professionals' priority, if you move on to the next slide, mate, healthcare professionals' priority, they want to keep their HIV patients engaged in their treatment plan. Let's assume that that's the problem that we're trying to solve. We know that educational webinars, event-based activity has been working well for us. We've got most people are subscribing and engaging with that content. They're not necessarily engaging with our push content, let's say, right? What would you suggest if your goal at this stage is to get those subscriptions, get people to onboard and into your sphere of influence, capture some data and understand what they're doing? What would you maybe suggest that we might do as an ongoing activity if we're to keep it simple? A couple of different things. Any thoughts?
I think some sort of way between the prescriber and the patient to remain in contact.
Yeah.
So that they can see progress.
Yeah.
Maybe even some prompts for the patient as well to stick to
Yeah.
the treatment plan that's been designed. So
Yeah.
the most from the medicine.
Yeah, so providing them with some kind of tools and resources to help support the patient. Yeah. And maybe, we'll maybe go so far as to say, like, given the formats that are working well for us, it might be nice to invite people to educational discussions and practice sharing around that type of activity. So given that we don't have much time, right, let's just assume you can apply that in practice, right? So we've got potentially an opportunity here to build, say, a webinar or case-based series where healthcare professionals are sharing resources with each other around how they're succeeding in keeping patients on their prescribed medication, okay? So that's a webinar series. But I guess you've got to get people to that. You've got to get people to those resources. So maybe some ideas around how you might attract people to those resources.
Engage with patient advocacy groups.
Yeah. So we've got advocacy group engagement.
Maybe a question here. Do we know why those patients don't stick to their treatment plan?
Maybe that's something we need to find out, right? So remember, this is the approach we're taking in terms of scenarios. So that's how would you find that out?
Maybe just selecting a couple of patients in there and ask the doctors to ask them why they're not taking that. And after that, just create a personalized plan for that. Because yeah, we can send them resources, but let's say if we send a PDF that will change the behavior, we don't know yet. So it's better to understand why they're not sticking to the treatment so that we can provide personalized plans for them.
Yeah.
Maybe a combination of patient support programs and patient longitudinal data.
Yeah, so we can get maybe part of the activities, we need to get some insight from patient groups, talk to them, talk to some clinicians, find out why it is, and then maybe design some educational content and webinars to support better practice, right? So let's just assume that. And maybe we can invite people to these webinar series through our existing database, perhaps through reps, and then maybe we use some of our media buy platforms to advertise that content as well. Something like that, right? So effectively what we're creating at the moment is an opportunity, we're effectively advertising an educational resource and educational forum, okay? One thing that's kind of interesting about this is, I mean, to your point about push messages, at this stage, if you're trying to get subscriptions or engagements, there's not a lot of talk about product. There's not any talk about product in this scenario at the moment. What we're doing is focusing on bringing people in. And that's maybe something just to take note of, is like, you know, thinking about how much effort you put into advertising or pushing out advertising content onto non-product information and educational sessions, but in a promotional sense.
But I think the point here is this is addressing a customer need directly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got a pain point effectively there because there's a suggestion that it's a struggle for some HIV patients to stick to their treatment plan.
Exactly, and there's like, you've got that level of information, and it's like, okay, now we've got the audience drawn in, how can we then elicit more information to get what are those other additional specific pain points where we can really tailor that conversation?
Yeah, I think you have to spread it quite wide. You may perhaps have things like social listening.
Yeah.
Like there's AI platforms now that can create you a customer journey at the click of a button, which does web crawling, captures all the information from all third-party sources. You obviously have to validate that because they could be some false information, but there are some tools out there now that can get you a really complete picture and create your patient journey in particular areas in seconds, which would ordinarily take like months, if not longer, and loads of money. So once you've got that holistic understanding of the needs of the patient, whether that be through patient counsel, social listening, maybe AI, spend a lot of time there, and then you can engage specifically based on their needs.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, exactly, drawing all of that wider information, attracting the HCPs into our ecosystem. We've now got them as an individual person, and then we can then use that to then gather their specific information and needs.
Yeah. Okay, so let's assume we've started the journey, right? Okay, so right at the beginning now, we've got a plan for getting some insights, genuinely understanding the unmet need for the healthcare professional and the patient, when providing the healthcare professionals with an opportunity to learn and understand, maybe from each other, through this series of resources and education, okay? So that's something that's valuable to them and maybe something they're likely to go and attend based on the insight that we have. So now let's move on to the next step, okay? There's no point in you guys spending money on running a webinar session, just for the good of the world and educating clinicians on this, unless there is some additional step to the journey. It can't be a standalone tactic. So how do you now move from having a webinar series to talking about your product and pushing content out around how the product can support this unmet need?
Nice. So we move on now to the second step, exactly as Dan said, so engaging HCPs, and our ultimate goal here really is to turn some of those leads into prescribers. And again, going back to some of the insights we got from the survey that we put out earlier, I'm sure it's no surprise that the most used activity that people are doing at this stage is sales reps with approved email and follow-up. So because we've got a lot of data already now at this point about our customers, the conversations can be super tailored around those specific pain points, and then the follow-up can be relevant as well, allowing our HCPs to then really consume that information and digest what they've had so far in their own time. What's most impactful, and it came up before on the previous step as well around kind of some of the additional activities afterwards, is again those educational meetings where you're kind of leveraging some of those existing customers or key opinion leaders and providing an opportunity there for that peer-to-peer advocacy and networking. So that's what people are saying is driving the most impact as well at this stage. And ultimately, if we're leveraging existing customers or KOLs, it's providing that confidence and reassurance to people that may be on the edge of prescribing and ultimately influencing the prescribing change there as well. And we saw some of that data yesterday in the Sermo readout as well, directly from HCPs in terms of what influences their prescribing behavior. So again, let's hear from you. So at this stage, it's an opportunity there to position the specific benefits of your product related to the pain points that we've now gathered about our customers. So what kind of tactics or activities would you do? So let's say they've signed up to a webinar series, they've attended it, they've maybe engaged in Q&As, they've engaged in polls, and you have even further information about them now. So what kind of tactics and activities would you do based on the data we've got in our scenario there? Any ideas?
I think a clear positioning, because it mentioned at the beginning that the drug itself has a more favourable
Dosing.
Dose schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the right phrase. So having that clear positioning, I think at this point would be really key, because it helps their pain point directly, because the patient doesn't have to take the drug as many times a day or whatever. So that there's a clear link there, I think. But also, you know, if there's been some sort of tool or something that's been provided, it's kind of beyond the medicine package, if you like, you know, kind of linking those two things together so that they understand, you know, it's from that company.
Yeah.
And therefore you're providing that extra support beyond the product itself. I think so. It's that clear positioning and the proposition.
Yeah, so say you're focusing on your proposition, right? Let's think like practically as well, right? So you're positioning around, you're wanting to talk about how the product also addresses this problem, right? But how are you going to go from being in a webinar to being able to deliver that information?
You need to use the CRM data you've collected
Uh-huh.
through the webinar registration to
Uh-huh.
generate some form of automated email, or you send a rep through next best action, and then use these pages on your digital sales presentation, because this customer is clearly interested in this, so detail these 3 pages next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, very specific around exactly those pain points and using that instead of going into a whole story about the product. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'll kind of extrapolate that a little bit just for the sake of just for drawing this out. But I think it's a great idea, right? So you go to the webinar. Perhaps after the webinar, there's a post-webinar follow-up. You know, this is what maybe you learned. Could you tell us, so we can maybe design better webinars? Of these 3 things, what's your main priority, right? So you've then got some actual insight about what this particular customer is interested in. So say there's potentially 3, let's just say there's 3 kind of key pain points, and you have product data and a story around those 3 pain points to solve that problem, okay? So if they fill in that survey, it goes into the CRM system. Perhaps you could even get that from the registration. But if you were able to, for example, store that in the CRM, if we're using reps, at least according to the data, we're seeing that the reps are the best way to get a sale. So as a marketeer, you're thinking, my goal is actually I need to get people into rep conversations because that's my best tactic, that's the best, most impactful thing. So you've now got maybe 3 different sales presentations that the reps can give, and if they know which one to give, then they're going to be more relevant, for example.
The MSL is quite strong there as well, isn't it? So I think having that ready as well, you know, if they want that extra level of conversation at that level, then having that available as an option for them.
Exactly.
Could be, I almost see maybe some options on the email.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a follow-up, you know, if they don't respond and book an appointment, or they want some further engagement with somebody, then maybe there is a fallback of some information on the website. So at least there's no dead ends, you know, they keep moving.
So it's going to save your email
Okay.
Yeah, and that's really good because the data on previous step and this step, it's all about actually that follow-up digital resources that they can consume in their own time. It's shareable, and really they can continue that conversation. The other part here as well about the educational meetings, how else could you potentially follow up in using that as the data that's showing up here?
I think you need to give them some real-world evidence as well.
Mhm.
There's a lot of evidence that says that, to make that switch, and this is what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to get them to switch over and differentiate. And so the sort of the best way for a prescriber to do that is to have that peer-to-peer interaction.
Yeah.
So, give them the real-world evidence, but give them a chance to talk about it with their peers in that sort of educational meeting scenario.
Yeah, so could we facilitate that as Pharma, and like who could do that?
Webinar,
Yeah.
but follow up with more opportunities. It's not just
Yeah.
one hit wonder, you've done a webinar and that's it, we're going to rely on email forevermore. Because I would, suggest that email is not necessarily the best way of getting that sort of interaction that you want ultimately.
No, it's a connector.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the connector, exactly. So yeah, I would keep pushing the content out.
I wonder if it's worth considering things like podcasts, which you could film as well and offer as a video for people to watch if they prefer that. And it's just another way for them to engage and great with KOLs.
Yeah.
As well.
And maybe if we're trying to simplify, we could take the content that we're producing from the webinars, take short clips of that. We could film people afterwards with follow-ups. You can make a podcast. Maybe you can even transcribe it and get AI to make a white paper, right? Just use the content as far and as wide as possible, because just bearing in mind the original situation, which is we don't want to do too much, right? I think this is part of the problem, is trying to keep it relatively simple.
And on that point as well, I think that's one of the things that'd be interesting anyway, like in terms of webinars to then videos and podcasts, actually a lot of people that I speak to, they're almost creating new video content, new podcast content, and not really repurposing that webinar content. So
Yeah.
actually, how can we just simplify it and use what we've got and repackage it correctly as well?
Yeah, we also talked about like having peer-to-peer engagements, and I just wrote down here like maybe there's a rather than that having to be like purely designed as from a marketing perspective, it's like trust the sales force or the MSL team to run those, so providing some guidance on this is how you deliver the detail aid, but if a doctor wants to talk about that with an existing customer, this is some guidance on how to pull that meeting together, have a discussion, have some peer-to-peer engagement, and solve each other's problems. So let's
move on. Yeah.
Let's move on. So let's assume so far, just to recap, right? We've got advertising for webinar series and educational resources that solves the clinician's problems. We've got registration pages. We've got insights first, right, which we're getting to make sure we get the content of those that information correct. We've got registration page that allows people to register for our webinar series. Perhaps there's a little bit of teaser content there to show the value. You've then got attendance and reminders for those webinars, which people can go to. There's post-event webinar, which allows the clinician to input some of their own information to make sure they're going to get relevant content. That gives the sales force something relevant, at least like 3 to 5 different options to give a different story. They can then approach the clinician, given that we've got consent through the webinar, to have a conversation about that specific pain point, so it's very relevant. And they have a set of guidelines where they can bring in other clinicians to have that discussion too. Also hosting the content from the webinars on the website on demand, so the reps can also use that to send people for further information. So we've got a relatively simple workflow to help you get people from, unengaged to interested in the topic to talking about the product and how it solves it. That, I assume, will be a cycle until someone tries for the first time, tries to use the product. So the next step effectively is like we imagine that somebody for the first time has started using the product in a patient. They've become a customer effectively. So the next step is then helping these doctors to achieve clinical success. How do we make sure they use the product again? How do we make sure they use it consistently? And how do we potentially expand the use so that they're using that product on a regular basis in complex situations and feeling very confident? So again, we did with the same process. This is what kind of came out as the most impactful activities. So yet again, sales rep, like face-to-face or webinar, virtual meeting-based content with a product website kind of came high up on that. Again, educational meetings.
No.
Oh, sorry, this is wrong.
Yeah.
So this is what people are doing.
Yeah.
What came up high, if I want to move to the next one, was, educational meetings, sales rep with digital resources. So that's quite highly the kind of top 2, and then it goes down into road shows and stuff like that. One thing that I actually found very interesting here, because there's and I know it's quite a small data pool, but like often we see that clinicians want resources for patients, and I would find at this stage that would be quite a valuable thing, but actually came down very low in terms of
Is
how
the
people
previous
are
one,
ranking
yeah,
that.
what people are doing, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, not seeing that much. But yeah, we'll just be interested to hear from you, like, what do you think, based on this, where we're at the moment, what simple activities could we be doing to ensure that the clinician becomes confident in use of the product following their first time use?
I think the point of being simple is important because there's lots of things that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
But a next step could be just positioning those KOLs, those clinicians as KOLs, and thinking about that peer-to-peer in a
Yep.
simple way. So perhaps not creating new content for them, but thinking about how they perhaps could share that content.
Yeah.
They become the KOL.
Yeah. That's a great idea. So, like sharing experiences, for example.
I think this is fundamentally, it kind of moves at this point from selling to helping.
Customer service.
They've agreed to trial
Mm-hmm.
and potentially switch, so how can you then help them get the best out of that switch? So what's going to give them confidence to, when they are prescribing for the first time, to be clear with the patient about what that switch means?
Exactly.
And there's probably a bit of information about maybe managing potential side effects maybe, and how that might be different from the previous products or things
Yeah.
like that. So I think there is that fundamental shift at that point.
Exactly, and that
Less
brings
about selling.
exactly, and it brings it back to the initial case study context that we gave, right, with the patient monitoring, the side effects, the lifestyle, and really managing those different situations. So what content could be provided potentially for different situations.
Yeah, that patient support program, I think is so critical because
Mhm.
it's going to give us patient-reported outcomes.
Yeah.
Which are critical for the healthcare professional to be here, right? And the PSD programs are just so critical, across multiple therapeutic areas. It provides the healthcare professional with a level of insight that they're not going to get anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So assuming we have patient support program, with support and additional resources, you're potentially looking to give those clinicians an opportunity to share their experience, like almost start to become advocates. How would you see that being orchestrated? By the contact, like the field contact, or more centrally?
I think it's a mixture.
Mixture, yeah.
This is where you manage them like a KOL, right? So
Yeah.
you want them to have a touch point. I feel like, if I'm honest, I feel like this is really generic in terms of educational meetings.
Yeah.
Quite lazy responses.
Yeah. No.
But I think it is. Like at this point, you would want to bring them in, especially in like a high cost, low volume
Mhm.
area like HIV, right? I haven't worked in that area, but I'm assuming. You want to bring them in. That's like they're part of your
Yeah.
ecosystem internally. Med director, you want to get them. Is there any trial work they can be done, they can be involved in? Is there another trial centre? I would be looking at local trials at this point because ultimately getting them speaking to their community is one thing, but if you bring them into your internal ecosystem, they're yours then.
Yeah.
They're part of you. They feel like you're supporting them, and they do. So I would be looking at, beyond just a case study, is how do we expand this out to other indications,
Yeah.
bring them into the centralised global trial program if there is one.
Yeah.
It's that sort of stuff now.
Yeah.
You've done the quite highly generic, and now you're going really personalised with it. So it's like the bottom of the funnel. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Exactly, and you're activating them in different ways, as you said, and actually that's now contributing to like the next cycle of things as well. So in different ways,
Like
yeah.
an educational meeting at this point, it's
Yeah.
like I'm like everyone else.
Yeah.
I think you said imagine like a KOL. I think
Yeah.
that is the key point.
Yeah.
How do you deal with others?
Yeah.
I think it's also how people digest content now. It's less like reading long publications. I'm really surprised the videos and podcasts so far down the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so are we.
Worried
Yeah.
about compliance and everything else, but there is a real increase in social media use. Like a lot of HCPs have got thousands or tens of thousands, even 100,000 of followers now on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So there's a real untapped opportunity there to leverage that and also have content that's more digestible. There's all the stats out there, right, that suggest that people have attention spans of like just a couple of minutes, right? Obviously scrolling on Instagram and stuff like that. So people's appetite and how they digest content has fundamentally changed. I think you've got
Yeah, it's a great point, and we were surprised looking at this as well, because we basically said, like, looking at these bottom three, we're like, yeah, any other industry, actually, they would probably rank quite high up, because it's kind of that ongoing evergreen content,
Yeah.
which is helping people day to day.
But it might be a bit chicken and egg. Like
Mm.
the reason people might not use it is because they're crap. You know, like the format is sometimes irrelevant. Everyone knows that everyone watches videos. Like everyone likes videos sometimes, but people like good videos, not bad ones. So if we're producing bad ones, it means that they're not working. So, I mean, you can only take so much from what people say is working and what's not working, but it's just for illustrative purposes, I think. One thing that maybe, I think, like, there's one thing that's perhaps slightly missing. I feel like we've kind of stepped from someone uses the product the first time. We've got this idea of building almost an advocacy program, this, maybe triggered by the rep or the person who's got that interaction saying, like, this person's ready, let's engage them in this program, bring them into our sphere of influence, bring them to ad boards and have discussion with them. But is there anything, do you think, that we could do just in that immediate phase? It's like, okay, I've found a patient.
What's the next patient then?
Yeah, like,
Oh yeah, we're going like full in.
Yeah.
Trial program.
yeah. So I've just said, okay, like, I'm willing to switch. Like, I'm using this medicine. I believe in this. I believe in the value. I'm going to try it. I think I've got the right patient for it. What can we be doing to make sure that that's a successful experience? Because if it's not, that's the end. They've fallen out, right? So how do we make sure that the patient succeeds, potentially? That's probably the only thing that's missing, I think.
I think that's quite simple, isn't it? That's what I see it, but I think at that point you provide very kind of basic, simple information about how to use the product and the things to look out for.
Yeah.
Because as a prescriber, that's what they'll need.
Like a guidelines, like a
Yeah,
guidance
and
document.
just the main kind of side effects to watch out for and any differences, main differences, and you could do that, either give them options, I would say. So if they want to see a rep running a cell again or have information on the site, they could download maybe if they want to print it or whatever, just give them options to get that information really easily, but based on their choice.
I think
Yeah.
you need something that's always on, because you can't predict when that patient's going to turn up. So
Yeah.
you can't, unless you've got a rep on speed
Yeah.
dial,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
prepared to
yeah.
take that
Yeah.
call.
Yeah.
So,
That's a great point, yeah.
Yeah.
I think be there at the moment, make sure they understand where that is, like maybe that's on your website.
Yeah.
Menaz, you had a point as well, so you've had your hand up for a while, yeah.
In the
Yeah.
UK, the switch doesn't happen by doctors.
Mhm.
It's done by specialist
Yep.
pharmacists, and in NHS there are optimized RX and
Yep.
script switch.
Yep.
So basically, the medicine management make a decision across the population that they're going to switch to this product, and they put a message on whatever system they're using, optimized RX or script switch. So when a doctor goes to prescribe, they get a prompt to say use less medicine. So and they can do that scale. So they can change prescription across large population for that health system.
Right.
So the doctor is with other people, stakeholders,
Yeah.
medicine management, payers are involved in making.
Yeah, so in that situation, which could be common in different countries as well, different things like devices, for example, you would maybe not the decision maker necessarily, but perhaps there's an opportunity along with that guidance on what might happen with the patient, how to support use the product. Maybe there's also, here's some tools and resources you can use to advocate for this product getting on the formulary, right, as an influencer.
You need to have an understanding of the health system and all the
Mhm.
stakeholders and bring them on board.
Mhm.
And you need to show what's in it for them, for the different stakeholders. Because the doctor's probably looking at benefit for the patients, but the pharmacist might be looking at potential cost saving
Yeah.
or simplicity.
Mm.
I think it's worthwhile considering those things.
Yeah, I love that. And that probably comes in a bit earlier in the process as well in terms of the insights gathering where we're looking
Yeah.
to turn that into the prescriptions, right? So I think that's definitely a key thing that we missed out earlier in terms of some of the insights that would have come out and we would have built into the plan. So
Right.
great that we've got that, because this is very much a working plan that we're adding to.
Yeah.
I think to build on that too, is that recognizing that this product is really coming to market as a second line therapy, right? So effectively what you're saying to the doc is that use this product if you're not achieving the results that you want with what you're using right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
So then what you're effectively creating is, back to your point, which is a profile of an audience that is less responsive to existing therapeutics that are out there.
Mhm.
So as a healthcare professional, keep an eye out for these
Yeah.
characteristics that
Yeah.
you can use to inform likelihood of this being more successful than the alternative.
Yeah.
I think just to build on that, I was going to say about identifying patients. I mean, you might have found a healthcare professional that's got
Yeah.
is super important, and that can go for all stakeholders as well. So, you know, because the last thing you want is a healthcare professional to make a switch or whatever and prescribe something, and the pharmacist to query it or to, you know, override it. Well, I don't think they can override it, but anyway, you know, it needs to come at all angles so that the pharmacist is looking out for those patients as well, and then you've got the sort of the loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And depending on your jurisdiction, you can ask a lot of those questions with the PSP. In some markets, you can do that beforehand, some markets you
Mhm.
have to do it after.
Mhm.
But maybe you'll get some of that insight there too.
Cool. So I want to just kind of pause it there, right? And like, I know this isn't fully comprehensive built out, but what we are going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to map out what we've got, like put it into a nice format, like a workflow, maybe on some slides that you can take away. And if you like some of the connections and ideas, then you can use them. I think the important thing that, that I hope some people would take from this is like, whilst I know like this isn't fully comprehensive yet, but if you start thinking about your customer journey in some simplified stages and trying to understand the goal at that specific stage and what the customer wants at that specific stage, if you start to build out, even if it's just tactically, you build out those tactics and look at how they connect, you can start to see gaps. Like we noticed, like, the post-email gap or like a survey gap to make sure it's relevant. You can start to build out a workflow of all the things that you actually want to do that you think are impactful. And the benefit of this is, rather than every year saying, okay, well, what should we try this time? Let's try like and do an animated series that we post out on social media, or let's try that. What you've actually got, you've got a workflow that starts to become almost always on. It's a workflow that you can monitor. You can easily build a KPI into every single piece of this component, like how many click-throughs do we get on the survey? If loads of people attend the webinar, loads of people open the post-webinar email, but nobody clicks on the survey, then you need to redesign this part of the pathway, tweak the wording, make it more compelling to fill in the survey, and you'll get more people coming through to the rep. If reps aren't managing to have any calls, then you don't have the right outbound email from the rep to get the calls. So if you've programmed this out, you can actually map a KPI for each component and start to optimize. So you start thinking about this as a whole integrated campaign where each point can be optimized. So yeah, just wanted to kind of really emphasize the point that we've only spent 20 minutes or so. We haven't got into the detail of everything, but we have actually started to build out quite a cool marketing flow that you could potentially use in practice. So hopefully, like, you got something from that. Maybe take that exercise. It's something that you could do, back in the office with people. Build something out. Start simple and try not to do everything at once. So yeah, thanks so much for taking part and giving us all that information. We are going to, as I said, write this up. So if you want access to that in a nice format that you can use, then yeah, scan the QR code. You'll be able to get the slides, the information on the flywheel and stuff. We're also going to provide some extra content, like talking through this and some of our comments on what we've got there. To be honest, what we'd also quite like to do is to give people a bit of a safe place to share information and stuff, to work through problems like this. Like maybe people have built journeys and they've got good adoption, or they haven't. Share what's worked and what hasn't worked. So we are planning to start a bit of a closed community where you guys can talk and share experiences, maybe just meet some like-minded people. Yeah, if you scan the QR code, we'll also invite you to that, and you can be part of it on an ongoing basis. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys.